So and that's a different story for another evening, I guess. But yeah, the most stressful time is probably the threat time, the comebacks, the aftermath. That's probably the toughest one to deal with, or the build-up, when it's not sudden, when it's not in your face. When you've got something that might kick off in an hour, in a week, in a month, and you've got to face that. Just like the job interview, just like the getting on stage and performing, it's all the same thing. And when you've got a long time to dwell on it, that's when it can really start to, or your mind will start to play tricks on you, and it will start to make it way worse than it actually is. So they're probably the two worst ones. When it's in your face and you've just got to deal with it, then you just get on with it, and you don't have time to kind of think about it or try and rationalize it or blow it out of all proportion. I think it's when you get time to think about it before and after that it can, and you're your own worst enemy then, because you just make it worse for yourself. So yeah, didn't really give you a specific event, but that's kind of, for me, that's when it happens. That's the worst bit.
Several things. Al, number one, it's the guy who doesn't say anything that backs up on you. That's the nightmare. The guy says, "Yeah, you'll be back. Gotcha. Okay, you're looking for rent-free space in my head. Sure, gotcha." The dude who just quietly leaves, he's the one that's going to be the worst one. And Kris, you keep on asking these questions that I go, you're doing this to me on purpose. Okay, thank you. And Nick, I want to point something out. You've trained, you've spent your life doing this stuff. Okay? You have skills and levels of talents that don't even think about being like, sure, Rory and I got experience, so what? That doesn't matter. You have talents that this is really important. I want to talk to you about body mechanics and stuff like this. So it's not a matter of, gee, I've never been in this stuff. Don't worry. It shows you have better common sense and more class than I did. Seriously. You're sitting there, you're talking about all the things that you do, I wish somebody had explained that to me. I kind of missed that memo. Right? So, the fact that I was involved in so much violence isn't really something to be proud of, because it really shows a lot of stupidity on my part, right? A lot of bad behavior on my part. So it's like, good for you for not getting into it. Good for you for having the self-discipline not to be there, right? Now, Kris, that again, I'm sitting there and as everybody else is talking, I'm thinking about, well, then there was this time, and then there was that time that that was a bad lesson.
You gotta pick one.
But one of the ones, man, I was a young stud. I was hot. I was 22. I was quick. I was bad. I was all that. And I met a guy who, his name was Alan Kahn. And he was bald, old, and big old grizzled beard and a snaggle tooth, and he had a big old gut. And he'd been wounded in Vietnam in 1958. Eisenhower advisors. Before it's like, but we weren't in there. No, we were in there. He was a ranger, and his specialty was a trick that they had learned from the Turks in Korea, where what they would do is they would sneak in, decorate somebody's hooch with their intestines, and then sneak out. And this guy, when he said 58, he expected me to say, oh, well, we weren't there. And I said, oh, you're one of the guys Eisenhower sent in. So we started talking, and he explained to me that, this was his MOS. And we were talking about knife work, and I said, I've always had trouble with this one particular move. And he looked at me and said, oh, that's easy. I'm sorry, you don't say that to a 22-year-old stud. Oh, yeah, you fat old man, what do you think? And we squared off. We got some practice knives. And he looked at me and said, you ready? Now, I learned 2 lessons right there that day. Number 1, when an old fat guy asks if you're ready, you're about to learn a really bad lesson. The second lesson didn't show up for a number of months. But when I said, yeah, I swear this old man blurred. Right? But before he blurred, something came over his eyes. And I remember half thinking, uh-oh. And the next thing I knew, I was down, and he'd hit me in a kill zone. And, I mean, I was crushed. I mean, I just got my butt kicked by an old fat guy. Right. And, I mean, I really hate to say it, for the next few fights that I went out and got in, these poor guys, they paid the price for my pride. I just overdid on these poor guys. And it took me a number of months before it finally dawned on me what Alan had taught me. And that was, I was there to fight. He was there to go home. And he was the first time that I had ever encountered the difference between asocial and social violence. Because it wasn't a measuring contest. It wasn't, I'm going to kick your butt. This guy was there to get the job done. And that actually saved my life the first time I encountered somebody coming at me with the intent to kill me, when it wasn't in training. And I suddenly realized, I've seen this before. This isn't a game. And that was probably, that one, Alan passed away, I heard, a few years ago. And I never really had a chance to thank that man, but that was a lesson that saved my life on numerous occasions, and later when I was doing this profession. Because it was just that awareness of, wow, there is a world of difference. And I've tried to articulate to people, and they go, oh yeah, I know the difference. No, you don't. Until you actually see it coming at you, it's hard, you can't articulate it. But once you see it and you go, okay, this is social, there are rules here, there's levels of force here that are appropriate, and then there's other situations that's like, the level of force is, he's going to be dead in 5 seconds. And it's knowing how to tell the difference. And I mean, that I think was one of the biggest lessons that I had, that, I owe Alan Kahn for that.
You're talking about, how many years ago was that, Mark? 30? Yeah. And Rory, I think when we first met, you just shot that guy in the leg. It was the day before, yeah. Well, you guys are both going over these things, and Rory, I've heard you speak about that before, and I get it, and of course, Mark, what you say, resonates with me too, because I go back to a time where it was 30 years ago, where I shouldn't have been where I was. Oddly, that's how these things happen, eh? But it was a party, and it started to get out of control, and pretty soon, no one was turning in the direction of the skid. It was just bad, and then a couple guys just, I don't know what they did. They left for a while. They came back, and man, their eyes were glazed over, and they were whacked on something. I have no clue what it was. All I know is that violence ensued. And I mean, people were getting beat down, and stuff was getting smashed, and it was crazy. But I remember the one moment of it where I had escaped into another part of the house. By the way, I want to let everybody know the bathroom is not necessarily the best place to run to, because the windows aren't as big as they need to be to get out. But anyway, so yeah, I found myself having to go down the hallway and cross this stairway. And as I approached the stairway, I could remember hearing, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it. And I peeked around the corner, and there was a guy about 2 steps down in front of me, and he had his hands up and was going, don't do it. And there was a guy at the base of the stairs. He had a shotgun pointed up at us, and I'm peeking around there like, yeah, and he pulled the trigger, and it misfired. And I go back over that night. There's more tales to the end of it, but those are more of the cleanup stories. But that one moment in that night, I keep going back to it, and it was a case of, you can look at it and go, it was a place I shouldn't have been in the first place. Number two, it started to get wiggy, and I still stayed. And then when it got really crazy, and out of control, if that gun had fired, I surely would have been hit. There's no question I would have been hit. And all I did was I just mushroomed. That's all I did. I just peeked around the corner because I made a bad decision in trying to escape when everything had gone sideways. And that's a bad time to make an escape, is when it's all breaking loose. So, I look at that moment, and there's a lot of, it's kind of a bullseye moment for me. There's that red bullseye right in the middle of